A very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar on stakeholder management, engaging the organization for results. I'm Megha Bhatia and I have here with me Claude Maley, who is going to lead this webinar today. Before we start, I'd like to take you through a few housekeeping details. The slides will be available on our SlideShare page, and after the webinar, in about 2 weeks' time, we will email the link to you. Also, the recording of this webinar will be available for you to view, and we'll email the link to you as well. After the webinar, there will be a webinar survey that will pop up. Please do take the time to complete this for us. During the webinar, if you have any questions that may pop up in your mind, please feel free to type them in the questions box, and we will allocate time for Claude to address your questions at the end of the webinar. Now, please allow me to introduce you to the presenter, Claude Maley. Well, Claude is Managing Director of MIT Consultants, which is a consultancy and education practice. He is based in Malta. He comes in to the region, to the Middle East region, very, very often to conduct courses and to have consulting practice for clients around the Middle East. I'm going to pass it over to Claude now, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Megha. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Claude Maley, and I'm very happy for all of you to be present here and dedicate some time to this webinar, which is going to take about 40 minutes roughly. We are going to talk about stakeholder management, which is a key point for anyone who wants to get results done in the organization, and especially if you are responsible for programs and projects. Please do note down any questions you have. We do have a chat box that opens up, and then at the end of our webinar, I'll be very happy to answer any of your questions, as long as we do not take hours and hours on it. So let's start with what we're trying to do. Basically, stakeholder management is one of the key areas where, as you're managing a project, you have a variety of stakeholders, and as you're managing a project or a program, there are major deliverables and, of course, KPIs that need to be met for the organization. So how do we actually engage all of these individuals and organizational entities to be able to achieve this? We have some objectives. There are 5 major objectives in this very short webinar of about 35 to 40 minutes. So I'll be selecting some of the key points that you can obviously follow. And I encourage you to come to our different seminars and courses next year in 2016 at Informa here in Dubai, where we explore many of these topics and more. So I'll be very happy to welcome you next year. And I will be wishing you Christmas and New Year at the end of this webinar. How to engage our stakeholders, some relationship techniques that a lot of people talk about, but they don't seem to be able to establish in some formal manner. How do we communicate? And one would be surprised that there are many techniques that we do use, maybe implicitly, but we can be more explicit, and we'll end up with some influencing and some very high-level ideas as to conflict management. So let's start with a classical stakeholders definition. We align all of our webinars and courses to the PMI, so let's go and dig into that very long definition, which you can read as I'm talking to you. But for me, anyone who has a finger in the pie, and the pie being the program or the project, is in fact a stakeholder. They have different fingers and different sizes of fingers, but the pie may not be with the size that you want it to be. So stakeholder management is the first thing to do. We need a process. We need to analyze who's who, what's what, and establish how we should engage individuals in the different roles that they need to perform throughout the whole project. Let's have a look at a few of the sociological and maybe psychological aspects of any individual or organizational entity in our stakeholders, be them internal or external. We are a social group in any organization, and individuals have different positions, have different titles. Executives, line managers, anyone who has a position in an organization will have interests. There will be professional, there will be financial, there will be emotional, and most of us, if not all of us, are measured on our performance. So that's a particular goal that people want to achieve. So we have to understand what are the motivational drives of individuals. We have to understand what are their interests, both professional and personal, and Sometimes a lot of individuals use projects as stepping stones to other things they may need to pursue in their career or for just personal ambitions. And they're not limited only to the internal organization. Those of you who do work with a lot of contractors and outside providers and suppliers, these individuals are also stakeholders. Now, stakeholders have all different types of interests. Now, I'd like to introduce you to what I call the 3D system. Mind you, what you have in front of you is a two-dimensional slide, but let's talk about a 3D. At the bottom of this particular presentation, you'll see a very classical, high-level product life cycle from the launch of an idea through the strategic thinking about it, through some planning for the investment, through the execution implementation, and then we go into some operational use where whatever product or service is produced by the project will be exploited. So that is the background. How long does this take? Well, it depends on the industry. Now, who are the different stakeholders? Well, let's first of all to see what concerns they will have at different stages. Once you understand those concerns, you'll be able to relate to each stakeholder, entity, or individual in the appropriate manner. We have what I call the drivers. That's the first D of the 3D. These are the individuals who are behind the reason for this project to exist. They have a strategic view, which means they are wanting to see business benefits. And those business benefits will actually be found and realized in the operational use. They want to jump over the projects. They don't like projects as far as I'm concerned. They find it as a waste of money and also a waste of time. They want the results tomorrow for $1. The only value they want is the delivery of value in the operational use. So these individuals, usually they will be somewhere in the upper spheres of an organization. They will have most probably executive positions, and they look at the overall investment of that particular initiative and venture. That's the first D. Another D I call the doers. These will be any stakeholder or any individual or organizational entity that has a work to perform throughout the whole project. That will obviously include the project manager and the core team, but any individual or organizational entity that will be performing work. Now, here the focus is very different in that the focus of doers would be limited to the duration of what they're doing. And some of them may not even know that they are in a project which is going to bring some business benefits to the whole organization as a whole. So there's another kind of psychology there. People will be very focused on performing and ending their task and handing it over to someone else. The third D is what I call deliverers. Why deliver? Because this will be the set of stakeholders who will deliver the value which has been set that the drivers would wish to achieve in operational use. In very simple terms, these are the users. They are waiting for products and services to come. That will certainly modify the way they perform work. That will certainly modify their processes. They'll certainly modify their skill sets required. They need to reskill, retool. And on top of that, using the product and service that is produced, they will be measured on their effectiveness. So they also have a very different view. Some of them may well welcome a new product or service. Others may be rejecting it, like everything is working fine here. Why do I need something new? Others may be very fearful of change. Others may be wanting to address issues like what kind of new skills, what kind of new infrastructure do I need, what kind of new processes. So their focus is on the aftermath of the project. However, they need to be involved very early on. So 3D is one technique which I have used quite often to understand the major, so we say, psychology of our set of stakeholders. So how do we actually know who the stakeholders are? Well, we do a stakeholder analysis. And it's a very simple 5-step. You identify, you establish who's who, what's what. And as we'll see in the next few slides, you try to determine what kind of importance and influence they have, so that you can then, from the outlining of where they will fit within the project and its assumptions, how they will participate. Now, this is a very iterative process to be performed many times, especially upfront in the initial stages of your planning and your work performing to get to some form of design and getting approval for pursuing a project. And as you go through the project, things change. So we'll see later on how that is the dynamics that you have to follow. So the actual process is a 5-step, as I say. However, multiple times you will perform it. So you have to make an explicit effort, first of all, to understand what is the extent of the project, what does it cover, what are the organizational entities, internal and external, that it will be covering, and of course be affected by. So this whole list, some people do it obviously as a list, which is fine. I prefer to do it by a graph, as you can see here, where this is very dynamic with the team. I often use walls, post-its, and a lot of individuals participate, and you create something which is similar to a mind map some of you have done. And this will be the core team. I would very often also invite a sponsor, because he or she can also give some insights as to what other organizational entities could be involved. So you develop a whole set of spokes around the project, and each spoke has terminal points. You can break that down to certain levels where you want to identify an individual with a name, okay? And by doing so, you can actually also relate how they function together. The pestle model that you see here is a very good technique as well, very much like a breakdown structure. You break it down by major centers of interest, political, economic, etc. That's another way of being able to scope as much as possible at an early stage who's involved. From that, you can schedule and prepare meetings and interviews, obviously for reasons of the project, which are to establish who needs what, to later on establish requirements, which will be those very important things to fulfill the scope of the product. But also, as we'll see, by doing so, you will be able to establish communication channels, which are very important in maintaining the stakeholders' interests and understanding their expectations that do evolve. No expectations, as I've ever met them, are static. Now, as we're doing this meetings with individuals or exchanges with individuals, and maybe guided by other people within our structure, we want to be able to have an idea of where do these stakeholders fit in a very simplistic but very powerful matrix of importance and interest. Importance, we're really talking about organizational position. Importance could well be obviously the drivers would be very important behind that. It could also be the famous deliverers, organizational operational units that will be receiving the product and service. And you can either do it by high, medium, low, as you can see on the y-axis, or you can have a 1 to 10 scale. It doesn't really matter as long as you have some scale on the importance. Similarly for the interest. Now the interest is more difficult to ascertain. If you meet people, if you have interviews, you can understand where they're coming from, or you might well say this particular project has a major impact on, shall we say, the way the organization functions as a manufacturing, for example. So a certain stakeholder should be interested high enough here, or if there are very tight financial, or it's a CapEx kind of program, then I'm sure the financial people are very highly interested in how you're going to be spending the funds. So by doing so, in this 2x2, one can then plot where each of the stakeholders would fit. If they fit in the top right, that means high importance, high interest. I'm sure that means you got to engage them and satisfy as much as possible. They may well be driving the contents of the major expectations of the project and also the constraints. If they are within high importance by low interest, now that's a quite interesting combination. So you want to keep them there because they are important. Usually organizationally they're high up, all right, and they have certain positions of power. But you don't want to be able to give too much information, too many messages, because they'll be bored with it because they don't have any interest. Those who are of low importance at high interest, now that is a combination of organizational positions, okay, and they may well have high interest. This could be users, this could be certain line managers, could be obviously certain peripheral suppliers who have an interest in order to perform work on the project. So here you want to be able to make sure that they are informed appropriately. And finally, this 2x2, the monitor is low importance, low interest, very dangerous. Do not ignore people, they are there. No excessive communication, keep them aware, because sometimes you'll find, as we'll see in a couple of slides time, they are important in the informal communications that do abound in any organization. Below that you have a stakeholder communication plan. I'm not going to go into detail into that, but you actually post on the communication plan the results of your importance and interest. So what do we do with that? Well, first of all, we want to see how are we going to engage individuals? What's the involvement? And the first thing we have to see is what is going to be the level of participation. Meetings, interviews, exchanges, be them face-to-face, be them by video conferences, be it by email or by normal mail. How often do we want this participation? And by doing so, where are they coming from? So we have to go a little beyond just not looking at what we want to do in a project, but what would be their interest. So sometimes here you've got to guess, but if you have meetings and exchanges with these individuals, your guessing would be, I think, quite good. How long would their interest last? Well, short duration projects, 1, 2, 3, or 4 months, you can maybe maintain a certain momentum. Medium to long-term projects, a lot of things happen, people come and go, but you want to engage the individuals for continuous, which means apart from the classical weekly reports or monthly reports, you want to have other things which go outside of these particular type of frequent meetings. The intermittent would be those who are, shall we say, to satisfy, to inform. Once off, those you want to monitor, like maybe a kickoff meeting made in a kind of a town hall kind of format. So you will modulate that. And as you're doing so, you can also add that to whatever schedules you have of interviews. And the more you discuss with people, the more you exchange with people, like any network, your actual bandwidth will be broader and broader. So make a big effort of understanding how you can explicitly create those particular relationships. Beware of political games, because you'll be dealing, especially with large projects with many zeros to the left of the decimal place. People have multiple interests, and they may use you as a pony. All right. Now, that's not to be rude, by the way, and you may fall into the trap. I have fallen into the trap many times in my younger age, until I learned that a pony needs a rider, and they have to go together. So forget about that. Stakeholders have to buy in, so get them in to buy. Make sure that you map them in. Go out and seek them. Some stakeholders want to be in. Some people do not want to be in, but you believe they need to be in. So go out of your way so that you don't have what I call the mushroom syndrome, where you find that stakeholders come up like mushrooms after the rain, but that is during project execution. So be proactive. That's key. That's key. Now, as you establish your first map of stakeholders in your first interviews, your first communication links, you have to maintain and sustain that commitment. So throughout the whole of the project lifecycle, before and you get final approval, during execution, stakeholders change. They come and go. People get promoted. People change titles, okay? As projects progress, expectations may evolve due to market changes, maybe as well some of the stakeholders will be completely changing their mind or will be pushing back for other reasons which are not apparent. Look again at your communication plan. Make things alive. You cannot work in a black box. Reschedule meetings when necessary. Action plans are to be reviewed. You have to negotiate many, many times and see how those commitments, which may have been high at the beginning, are not faltering, or maybe some that were peripheral are now very high because the dynamics of the environment makes that one of the necessities of that stakeholder. So that will be from the point of view of stakeholder mapping. I'm sure a lot of you do something very similar. If you don't do something similar, I encourage you to map, to identify stakeholders, and to pursue a very structured way of establishing communications. Now, let's have a look at the relationship you want to have. It's nice to have a communication network, but if you don't know how to communicate down that network, then I don't think it's worthwhile myself. So who are we going to communicate with? Well, I remind you some percentages here. 75 to 90% of the time you are communicating in some way or other. So most of your time you are going to be engaged in exchanges of information. Okay? Now, who are you exchanging with? That's the point. Not only your core project team, you have to engage with your peers, of course, your management or whatever steering committee you have or sponsoring committee. You have to engage in communicating with a variety of external entities. So, do spend time. You're managing the work effort and you're not working on that effort, by the way. So focus on the lines, open the lines. It's like setting up a network, get your bandwidth wide, make sure the actual communications pathways are clean, okay? Sometimes you cannot access certain stakeholders because they are certainly high up in the organization, so use other stakeholders as individual. I learned very early on in my professional career, top management make decisions when I'm not there. So how can I be there without being there is by using another stakeholder who can be present there and they will convey my message. Now, they may, of course, say it's their idea, but who cares, okay? So we move on from that one. And do understand that people are going to be adversaries, okay? So not everybody is going to be on the same boat rowing in the same direction. So anticipate that. Don't be naive, okay? And look beyond just the stakeholders. As we'll see in the next few slides, there are other relationships which are informal, which are peripheral to your project stakeholder map, and that could also have an influence. Now, you don't want to go too far, or it gets very, very complicated. So upwards, senior manager of the organization, that will be directly your sponsoring group, your management group, your steering committees. You'll have your sidewards, these line managers and peers, other project managers. These are individuals who will be among your rank, shall we say, and different levels of the organization. Many functional departments, and these will be obviously the end users, line managers, and you will have to deal with all of the external entities which will participate in the project, and you have the core project team. So you're doing this 360, most probably looks like a gyroscope rather than a flat 360. So take the time to pinpoint where your time is going to be and spend that time. It is worthwhile. The extreme is stuck behind your desk or your office and you do not actually meet anyone. So that will be really, really bad. All right? Be proactive and expect evolution of expectations. Now, building a relationship map is complicated. Let me explain to you what it means. Don't think that a lot of people do it in a formal manner. You're going to map against all of the entities, how they relate to each other, so that you can see the relationship that are for the project and beyond the project. So let's have a look what this looks like. So this is a very generic kind of diagram where you've got the project managers, and you have circles, you have dots, and you have lines which connect each other, and you find then how do people communicate. Now, it's a heavy work to do, all right? But with a little thought and with your core team, I think you can do a great deal of advance on that. You want to see how the relationship works, you know. Not everyone is going to be communicating through a central point, which is you. All right, so that's fine. All right, now how are key stakeholders communicating? But they've got their little environment, and is that environment also identifying other stakeholders which need to be included in your map? You got managers, you got functional managers, internal, who will be maybe providing resources, also be a part of your deliverers stakeholders, and you can also add external providers. So all these connecting hubs, all right, give you a picture of a network. Now, those who are in telecommunications most probably do this kind of stuff. Okay, you may not do it fully, but do attempt it. It's an extremely powerful tool. Give yourself half an hour to an hour in a project. Sit down with your team and try to do it. If you've got your stakeholder list and map already established, then you can move on and try to do this particular diagram. Okay. And you'll be seeing what are the direct relationships there are in the map. Now, core team members, of course, directly to the project, steering group, stakeholders, key sponsors, upper management that you report to, other project managers because you're interfacing to them, and functional managers and operational managers. So these are all of your internal organization and every external provider that is part of your stakeholder maps. Those will be direct relationships. The more you have, the more time you're going to spend. So please do spend that time. Meanwhile, you have indirect relationships, which are peripheral to your project or program. So try to figure out who communicates with who. Don't do a spying kind of work, and do not try to read too much into it. Okay? Think about how you're going to be working with external services, things of that nature. The informal network, now that's, if you have the time to do it fully, I will give you a few medals. Often we think about who is talking to, and you need to know that, especially for mega projects where there are multiple stakeholders with maybe different views and different objectives. You may have joint ventures, you may have major contractors. Try to figure out how people communicate outside the boundaries of the program and project. And people do build networks through affinity with individuals, you know. Maybe because they went to the same school, or they practice the same sport, or maybe they live in the same neighborhood, or the kids go to the same school. You know, there are many reasons why people establish informal relationships, and that allows them to pursue whatever personal goals they may have. All right? So don't ignore those. Don't spend too much time, and you'll find that individuals who are sharing within informal networks do have, through this affinity, assistance to each other. You know, there used to be the old school tie syndrome in the UK, still exists. You walk around with your old school tie and you meet somebody with the same school tie, you've never seen him in your life, and all of a sudden you strike up a relationship only because you went to the same school, and certainly not at the same time. So that can influence. I'm not saying it does, but make sure that you do not step outside of that interest. Once we've got the communication relationship going, because we've established who's who within the actual map, now we have to talk about how do humans exchange. Now, it might sound a bit ridiculous for me to to ask you to listen to how humans will relate to each other in communication. However, it's very, very important that you are understanding how, especially on the face-to-face exchanges, many things happen, and you want to be able to ensure that the communication does not have any blockages. First of all, on face-to-face, make sure that you understand the percentage of the spoken word is very low. All right? This is done work by Dr. Berhabian, and you find that more than 90% is on tone of voice. That's a tone of voice. Non-verbal, well, you cannot see me, that will be my body language, all right? And other things of that nature. So when you are in exchanging face-to-face with individuals, we as human beings, we pick up signals very, very quickly. And we don't need to have one word spoken before we've already communicated something. So be open, have a body language that welcomes, so that you get rid of some of the obstacles which could exist if you do not take care of paving the way to a communication. Language is great. Language is great. Very structured language is great, all right? But in that one, we represent things, okay? We generalize things. Sometimes we have a vocabulary where either we distort what we want to say, or the people who listen to us get a distorted view. So there again, make sure you're using the right vocabulary, the right language to the right people. Non-verbal communications, a lot of body, voice, and words all together. The actual tactile, basically, you shake hands in certain countries, you don't shake hands in other countries. You are close to or you're far away individuals when you spoke to them. You are looking them straight in the eyes in some cases, others that would be considered to be insulting. So make sure that you are using the techniques that make the exchange with an individual easy and smooth. And there's nothing wrong with having emotions, right? And I've just said something about emotions. That was emotional, what I just said, by the way. And make sure that when you want to be able to do this within a project, you are guiding it towards the projects. And look at all the signals you're sending and all the signals that you are receiving. When you speak to people face to face, try to understand the emotions of the other individual, how they sit, how their shoulders fit, how their jaws are. Many things we are behavior, giving out that behavior. And when you want to be able to exchange with someone, do practice what is called active listening. Do show through your body, through your eyes, through your heart, shall we say, that you are listening. So in this photograph, these two individuals show completely that they are in sync by the body language, the way they look at each other, they are not tense, the relaxation. So the eyes and ears and heart and body are all participating. That opens the communication. As soon as you turn your shoulder away to someone as you talk to them, unfortunately, most of the time that's taken as being not interested. Rapport building, okay, is how within the communication that you set up, let's start now to expand on the bandwidth and get more messages to and from. It's very much like a telecom system. And when you are in sync, first of all, because we are human beings, people like people who smile, people who are open, people who are discussing things in a non-aggressive manner. And then with the words that you use are guided, in this particular case, to projects and programs, by the way, that you're in sync. So the attention, the positivity, the coordination of your gestures, key, very key. One wrong move, boom, you have an obstacle. And then sometimes it takes you a long time to recover. And you cannot have obstacles because your communication network is key for you to maintaining relationships and meeting expectations. Very simple. And the relationship you build, there's some great words in a dictionary, by the way. You have to be honest, sincere, ethical, and you have to show integrity. Try to communicate as clearly as you can, and the frequency depending on the interest of the stakeholder within the map that we saw earlier on. You don't communicate face-to-face all the time. All right? So there are many ways of communicating, but the communication is either one way or it's going to be bilateral, multiplex, whatever you want to call it. So there are many areas you want to communicate to maintain that relationship and also to ensure that you are dealing with a program and project that meets expectations, which are evolving. So you have awareness communications, where you want people just to know. understanding, where you want people to understand what is to know. You want engagement, where people will feed back here and give their comments and remarks. You want involvement, where people participate. And you want commitment, where individuals just pick up the ball and start running with it. So in this particular diagram, just in three major areas, face-to-face formats are great. So you have different types of meetings, different types of exchanges, where you can actually fulfill understanding, engagement, involvement, and commitment. If you want to use famous electronic, 21st century, be careful, people don't see you. So how you use it, this of course is video conferencing. What they actually hear, like you're hearing now, is just a voice, all right? You may have seen my photograph at the beginning of this webinar, all right? But you just hear the voice and you hear the words, all right? If you write by email, people just see the words. Now, how do you actually engage people in order to be able to have a message which is bilateral? And finally, you got classical paper, which is nice because people can touch it, can hold it. It's not very good for trees, I suppose. However, sometimes people want to keep it, okay? So you have many ways of communicating, and do choose the appropriate ones according to the nature of the communication you want to keep together. You're going to communicate with your peers for negotiating for resources, exchanging information on different types of allocation of funds, shall we say. You want to be able to discuss with them how schedules would work, especially if you're dealing with other program managers. Your superiors, direct superiors, will be your sponsoring group, will be individuals to whom you report as well. They want very synthetic reports. They want timely things. You might have to have face-to-face reviews, maybe infrequent in certain cases, every month or every 3 months. So make sure you are highlighting the issues. They want very succinct information. Subordinates, basically all those who actually work directly under the project, okay? Here's where you want to set up the major milestones. You want to be able to provide as much as possible the verbal exchanges, agendas, work briefs, so that they can get on with it. You also want to communicate as a representative of your company. You are representing your company, especially when you're dealing with a variety of contractors or suppliers. Go beyond now what we have from what I call the archaic 19th century idea. It is us and it is them, all right? Don't forget, when you contract out, when you are asking for a supplier or an advisor, you are seeking help because either you don't know how to do things, or you cannot do them, or you don't want to do them. So it's still yours. So understand their interests, bring them in. Obviously, there's some legal aspects that you cannot ignore, but we are dealing between individuals, all right? So make sure that there's some trust between people. Where are the areas where both can add value? Communication must go just beyond the weekly meetings and so on and so forth. And try to have an approach where the supplier is understood what they're trying to achieve, what they're trying to achieve, etc. The more we drive down suppliers, don't worry, they're going to be resentful, you know, and they're going to find multiple ways of getting back at the project manager. Okay, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I'm sure we can reduce the frequency of this happening. Finally, let's have a look at an area of great interest, because we are, as we discuss with individuals, we need to be able to put messages across, and very often we need to influence individuals. Now, there are three major components that need to be brought together for anyone to be influenced. The first one that we all ask ourselves is, what's in it for me? I mean, what do I get out of this? It's called worth. The second one is, okay, what you're telling me, is this credible? Can I believe it? It's called likelihood. And the third one is, well, how much effort do I have to put into this? I mean, that's effort. So worth, likelihood, and effort. So just imagine we have three circles, all right? And I'm trying to speak to you. I'm trying to influence you. If I do not bring those three circles as close as possible to cover each other, then I will not influence you because you will not find anything in it for you. You don't believe it, and you say, hold on a second, guys, this is a huge effort I've got to make. So how do I bring those circles so that they can be practically covering each other? That would be great. But if they are very wide apart, forget it. You are actually talking against the wind. So how do you address what's in it for me? Well, I think you should actually make sure by understanding the individual's perception on multiple things. You're speaking to a stakeholder. What is it that they're looking for? What is it that they are trying to strive for? Remember, we talked about personal and professional goals and objectives. What is their real problem on a day-to-day basis? How are they measured, right? Things of that nature. So if you understand that, right, and you are addressing that, then people say, okay, yeah, that's fine. It's not only financial, guys. Obviously, if you're going to put $1 million on the table, you might, this is called corruption, by the way. You might well find somebody will react to it. I would, I'm not sure of that. So discuss the desired outcome and how that fits to the individuals. Is this credible? Well, you can say a lot of things and people say, yeah. But if you can demonstrate what has been done in the past, what can be achieved again, what are the actions that can be taken in order to have a higher probability of something being achieved. It could be discussing with one of your team members on a schedule. It could be figuring out with one of the users what kind of transition has to be made in learning new techniques or adapting a particular process. If it's looking at with a contractor and trying to engage them to be able to meet certain very tight schedules and showing an attitude that you're there to assist them to do it, right? That way, people will say, okay, that can be done. It is maybe a stretch goal, but that can be done. So the circle of likelihood comes through and the perception is there. Last but not least is the effort. How much effort do I have to put into it? So people will always reject when, one, they don't know what needs to be done or how to do it. And number two, they cannot physically or materially do it. And it takes a lot of effort. So if individuals have an issue and you're discussing it, what can you do to ease the performance of work, to help and assist where it's necessary, so that the effort that individuals have to make, both intellectual and physical, is acceptable to them. And therefore, the third circle comes along with the other two circles, and the influence works. Meanwhile, you're using power. Now, what is power? Power means many, many things. And there's a very good model I encourage you to read by French and Raven. It's been around for some years, and it tells all about the different powers we have as leaders, as negotiators. And we have, first of all, a formal power, which is our position in the organization. Then we have different types of powers. We have the legitimate power. This would be your project management or program management title. You have coercive power, which basically is not a nice thing to have. However, it exists. People threaten, people intimidate. Usually it's veiled threats or veiled intimidations. There are referent powers where you possess certain resources or traits. Also, you can refer to, well, the boss told me that kind of stuff, where you are referring to a higher level of authority to actually influence more because it's not you, somebody above you. You have the reward power, which is very powerful, from the very thank you to the mega bonus, if you wish. And you've got the expert power, where the skill sets that you possess are going to be those which influence more individual. That's where the subject matter expertise comes in. So all these power models, I encourage you to read further. You bring them in as you are negotiating, you bring them in as you are influencing, you bring them in as you discuss and engage with stakeholders. You would like the organization to be successful in the achievement of the project. It's your role. And as you do so, you open up yourself. As you do so, you are demonstrating who you are. And that is great because people then, we all trust other individuals when we understand who they are. And the more you demonstrate who you are and you have integrity and you have honesty, people will open up. Not everybody. Let's not be naive, okay? However, most of us understand that we're in a social group and we exchange on a day-to-day basis in our workplace. So when you have that, the trust is very reciprocal. And later on, the need for influencing individuals becomes less because you have a greater communication. So collaborate, see who you are, try to convince, be honest, pragmatic, realistic, and very often people will accept influence. There's nothing wrong with being influenced, by the way. People will know whether you are influencing them or manipulating, by the way. So there are differences to that. And people listen. People listen when you are convincing, right? But that can only happen after you've established the channels of communication and your relationship is constant at the frequency that has been established and your network of exchanges is as clean as possible, okay? But you're going to have conflict. And there are many types of conflicts. We're getting to the end of our webinar here, by the way. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me, please do type them in. We have a wonderful mechanism of capturing your questions, so I'll be able to address those in a few minutes. Many conflicts are what are called functional conflicts. They are part and parcel of the job. How does work get done here? There may be interfaces, there may be resources that are not made available. Certain departments might be tugging away at each other for certain processes. There are contents, like two designers talking about something, or we're establishing a schedule. We look at different types of estimations. You also have, of course, individual relationship conflicts. Most of them are, I would say, easy to overcome if you understand there are cultural differences. Okay, there are differences between how to do things, not who the people are. Okay, and understanding the culture, that certain cultures respect certain type of authority, whilst others are a little cooler, more hippies types, And if you do not address these things, you will be stepping on the wrong toes, right? So conflict resolution, which is a whole topic by itself, and I encourage you to come to our different seminars on this. You want to focus on cooperation. Cooperating so that you understand what people want, but also you want to focus on what you want. So it's kind of a balance, all right? If I just push for what I want, I'm most probably pushing back the other individual. So I want to be able to understand the other individual so we can find a common ground, okay? So I want to be able to handle whatever conflicts by also trying to compromise, collaborate, because if I don't, the conflict becomes dysfunctional, and that's going to be counterproductive. When people walk away, they are irate, they are nervous, and the next time you see them, they pick up the conversation from where it was before. There's a key model here, classical. Let me show it to you. It's the famous win-win model, been developed, as you can see, some time back, and there are two axes on that. Assertive, how much do I want to get what I want? Cooperative, how much do I want to listen to what you want? So these two axes, right? Now, if I just go head down for wanting what I want without consideration of what you want, it's called competing. Now that's okay if a quick decision has to be made, if people have already got a good established relationship and the situation requires a quick decision. But if it is something which you're doing on a common basis without modulating, then basically you are squashing people down. And next time they'll just sort of nod at you, but you won't get their cooperation. Accommodating is the other way around. You want to make sure that there is harmony and you are willing to accept another individual's propositions because they may be assertive, but you prefer to maintain a kind of harmony between the two. So you might well give in in favor of harmony. All right, so that's a decision you have to make. Avoiding is very often used when you don't have enough information, or you just don't care. You just walk away from the problem. All right, so that doesn't resolve the problem. Very often you use, in meetings when you don't have enough information, and then you say, okay, let's park this for the time being. Let's get back to it when we get more data. That's classical, right? So you are going to address the conflict when you get more data. The win-win situation is collaborating, where both of you are seeking a solution, which is problem solving by trying to address both the needs of what I want, what you want, and there is inside there maybe a new solution that comes out of whatever conflict you are trying to address. Usually you're going to be compromising, by the way. You're going to be navigating between giving away a few things if the other person gives away, and you get yourself something which is acceptable to both parties. So in your discussions with your stakeholders, you have so many things to discuss at the high level of the project, at the low level of details, financial issues, technical issues, contractual issues, HSE issues, new processes to introduce for a new organization. You have so many topics that you've got to address. You're going to confront different individuals. Get that communication network in place. Make sure that you have a clean channels of communication. Go out of your way to have the appropriate frequencies, the appropriate volumes of communication, be it vocal, face-to-face, written, and do not forget the human-to-human exchanges. We're all humans, I suppose, and there's no robots listening to this. Okay, as we have humans, we pick up a lot of things, and we're going to get conflicts. That's normal. Conflict is not a problem. Okay, it's not resolving it or addressing it which is a problem. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, in order for you to be able to get your program and project to achieve the organizational results, there are big focuses, and I always use the three major words, okay? You are there to coordinate a variety of individuals, to facilitate the work of others, and to orchestrate all the different entities that will contribute to the goals of the organization. You are the catalysts, so go out and do it. Thank you. I am just checking out here to see the number of questions we have in our little pad. Thank you very much, Mega. I hope you've enjoyed this particular webinar. I invite you to the different courses that Informa does throughout the whole year, and I'm very happy to be able to participate in these. And please look at the Informa website for the exciting new courses we have in 2016. So yes, Ahab, thank you very much for your comments. And you can claim PDUs for your PMP. I'm sure that by connecting with Informa, they'll tell you how many you are, and you'll be able to go into the Informa website, to the PMI website, and you type in the actual code of this webinar. No, you don't type in the code. You are going to be looking at category B. That's right. I was just looking at my papers here. Yes, Ahab, you can certainly do that. Right, Susandra, Mr. Time, looking for the recorded version, please. Okay, you get that. All right, thank you. Al-Walid, see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. And Sanita, thank you very much. Okay, John, I see you have a very nice question here for those who are still around. Yes, well, doing stakeholder mapping, I would prefer to do it, in fact, on walls, right? Use a lot of Post-its. It engages the team and gets a lot of individuals. Okay, I see that, if you don't have more questions, that means that people have understood everything that's been said. I'm very glad about that. I'm sure Mega as well is very glad about that. This session is being recorded, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Anita, you can receive a copy of this presentation. It will be posted on the webinar site of Informa, and also you get a link being sent to you because you have provided your email address. Yes, you'll be getting that, and you'll have the pleasure of reviewing this presentation and maybe the pleasure of listening to my voice again. But that's another matter. You can also always take the volume off, by the way. What else can I say? Nothing else. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it remains for me just to thank you very much for assisting at this webinar and to wish you all a very happy end of year, festive season for those who are celebrating it, and wishing you a great 2016 and looking forward for you to come to all of the great seminars that Informa is holding in Dubai and elsewhere. Thank you very much and goodbye.